That old man can't even walk straight. The village chief scoffs as 82-year-old Samuel Kofi limps toward the escaped lion, terrorizing their community. The gathered crowd watches in horror, unaware that beneath his frail appearance lies a decorated army ranger who once survived alone in the African wilderness for 17 days. What happens next will show you that age is just a number when courage runs in your blood. If you believe heroes never truly retire, hit subscribe and share in the comments about a time someone surprised you with hidden strength. Samuel Kofi had been enjoying his morning coffee on the porch of his small house when the screaming started. At 82, his hearing wasn't what it used to be, but there was no mistaking the sound of pure terror, echoing through the village of Cedar Grove. He set down his cup and listened carefully. Mixed with the human screams was another sound that made his blood run cold, a deep, guttural roar that he hadn't heard in over 40 years. It was the sound that had haunted his dreams since his time as an army ranger in the Horn of Africa, where he had spent 3 tours training local forces and conducting reconnaissance missions in some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth. Samuel grabbed his walking cane and made his way down the porch steps as quickly as his arthritic knees would allow. His left leg had been mangled by an IED in Somalia in 1987, leaving him with a permanent limp and constant pain. But his mind was as sharp as ever, and right now it was telling him exactly what that roar meant. A lion had somehow gotten loose in their quiet Pennsylvania village. By the time Samuel reached the village center, a crowd of nearly 50 people had gathered at what they considered a safe distance. Police cars were arriving, their sirens adding to the chaos. Children were crying, adults were shouting, and in the middle of it all was Chief Morrison, the village's elected leader, trying unsuccessfully to organize some kind of response. "Where is it?" Samuel asked a young mother who was clutching her 2 small children. "The petting zoo," she said, pointing toward the small family attraction at the edge of town. The owner said one of the lions broke out of its enclosure about 20 minutes ago. It killed 2 goats and injured a man who tried to help. Samuel's jaw tightened. He knew lions, knew how they hunted, knew how they thought. During his time in Africa, he had tracked them through the bush, studied their behavior, and on 3 separate occasions, been forced to kill them in self-defense. But that was 40 years ago, when he was young and strong and equipped with military-grade weapons. "Police have called for animal control," Chief Morrison announced to the crowd. "Everyone needs to stay back and let the professionals handle this. How long until they get here?" Someone shouted. "Could be an hour, maybe 2, Morrison replied. "They're coming from the state capital. An hour was too long." Samuel knew that an escaped lion in a populated area was a ticking time bomb. The animal would be confused, frightened, and increasingly aggressive as more people and sirens surrounded it. Someone else was going to get hurt, possibly killed, if this wasn't handled quickly. Samuel pushed through the crowd, his cane tapping against the asphalt as he made his way toward Chief Morrison. "I can help," Samuel said quietly. Morrison looked down at the elderly man with obvious skepticism. Samuel was thin, bent with age, and clearly struggling just to walk. His gray hair was unkempt, his clothes were old and faded, and his dark skin was marked with the scars and wrinkles of 8 decades of hard living. "Mr. Kofi, with all due respect, this isn't something for civilians to handle," Morrison said dismissively. "Especially not someone in your condition." The comment stung. But Samuel had heard worse. Ever since his wife died 3 years ago, the people in Cedar Grove had begun treating him like a helpless old man who needed constant supervision. They saw his limp, his cane, his quiet demeanor, and assumed he was just another elderly resident counting down his remaining days. What they didn't know was that Master Sergeant Samuel Kofi had been one of the most decorated rangers of his generation. He had completed jungle warfare training, desert survival courses, and advanced tracking programs. He had killed enemy combatants with his bare hands, survived behind enemy lines for weeks at a time, and earned 2 silver stars and a bronze star. With valor. But most importantly for the current situation, he had extensive experience with African wildlife, including 3 separate encounters with lions that had ended with him as the survivor. I know about lions, Samuel said simply. I've dealt with them before. Morrison's expression became even more condescending. Mr. Kofi, I'm sure you've seen lions at the zoo, but this is a real emergency. We need to leave this to people who are trained for situations like this. Behind Morrison, Samuel could see the growing crowd of onlookers. Parents were holding their children close. Teenagers were recording everything on their phones, and elderly residents were shaking their heads in fear and confusion. Everyone seemed to be waiting for someone else to solve the problem. From the direction of the petting zoo came another roar, closer this time. The lion was moving toward the village center, probably following the scent of the crowd. Samuel knew they had minutes, not hours, before someone else got hurt. Chief Morrison, Samuel said, raising his voice so others could hear, that lion is going to keep moving toward the largest concentration of people. That's us. Every minute we... Wait, the danger gets worse. Sir, please step back, Morrison said firmly. You're not helping the situation. A woman near the front of the crowd recognized Samuel and spoke up. Chief, that's Sam Kofi. He was in the army for like 30 years. Maybe we should listen to him. Being in the army doesn't make someone qualified to handle wild animals. Morrison snapped. Mr. Kofi, I'm going to ask you one more time to step back and let us handle this. Samuel looked around at the faces in the crowd. He saw fear, confusion, and growing panic. Children were crying louder now, and several people were trying to leave but couldn't get past the police cars blocking the roads. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Fine, Samuel said quietly. But when that lion shows up here in the next 10 minutes, and people start getting hurt, remember that I offered to help. He turned to walk away, but another roar stopped him in his tracks. This one was much closer, maybe 3 blocks away. The crowd surged backward, parents scooping up small children and elderly residents reaching for support. It's coming this way. Someone screamed. Morrison was frantically speaking into his radio, calling for backup that wouldn't arrive in time. The other police officers were trying to establish a perimeter, but they were clearly out of their depth when it came to handling a dangerous wild animal. Samuel made a decision that would change everything. He walked back toward Morrison, but this time he bypassed the chief entirely and addressed the crowd. Everyone listen to me. Samuel called out, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades of military command. That lion is hunting. It can smell all of us, and it's moving toward the largest group. We need to spread out right now. Mr. Kofi, Morrison started to protest, but Samuel cut him off. Chief, with respect, you can arrest me later. Right now people are about to die if we don't act fast. Samuel began organizing the crowd with the efficiency of a man who had spent years leading soldiers in combat situations. He directed families with small children to move into the nearby hardware store, positioned the teenage boys to help elderly residents reach safety, and identified the adults who looked capable of following more complex instructions. The lion appeared at the end of Main Street just as Samuel finished positioning the last group of civilians. It was a male, probably around 400 pounds, with a full mane and the lean, muscular build of an animal in its prime. The beast looked confused and agitated, its head turning back and forth as it tried to process the chaos around it. Oh, my God, someone whispered from inside the hardware store. Samuel studied the lion carefully, his old training kicking in automatically. The animal's posture, the way it held its head, the rhythm of its breathing, everything told him this was a creature that had been pushed beyond its comfort zone and was now operating on pure instinct. Everyone stay calm and stay quiet, Samuel said in a voice that carried just far enough to be heard by those who needed to hear it. Don't run unless I tell you to. Running triggers their chase response. The lion took several steps down Main Street, its massive paws silent on the asphalt. It was magnificent and terrifying at the same time, a perfect predator displaced into a world it didn't understand. Samuel knew he had one chance to end this before it became a massacre. He looked around quickly and spotted what he needed: a construction site across the street where workers had been repairing the sidewalk. Among the tools scattered around was a sledgehammer and several pieces of rebar. Moving as quietly as possible, Samuel made his way toward the construction site. His limp made stealth difficult, but 40 years of muscle memory guided his movements. He had stalked enemy positions in dense jungle, moved unseen through hostile territory, and now he was doing it again on the main street of his own village. The lion's attention was focused on the hardware store, where it could probably smell the largest concentration of people. Samuel used this distraction to reach the construction tools without being detected. He picked up a 3-foot piece of rebar, testing its weight and balance. It wasn't the combat knife or rifle he would have preferred, but it would have to do. The metal felt familiar in his hands, and for a moment he was 25 years old again. Moving through the African bush with his Rangers unit. Samuel began walking directly toward the lion, his cane abandoned at the construction site. His limp was still there, but years of military training overrode the pain and uncertainty. He moved with purpose, with the confidence of a man who had faced death many times and emerged victorious. The lion noticed him when he was about 30 feet away. The great cat turned its full attention to this new threat, its golden eyes locking onto Samuel's weathered face. The animal's muscles tensed, and Samuel could see it calculating whether this human represented a threat worth engaging. "Hey there, big guy," Samuel said quietly, his voice steady and calm. "You and I have done this dance before." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the 82-year-old man they had dismissed as frail and useless faced down a 400-pound predator with nothing but a piece of construction rebar and 6 decades of experience. The lion crouched lower, its tail twitching with predatory focus. Samuel recognized the behavior immediately. The cat was preparing to charge. He had perhaps 5 seconds to position himself correctly, 5 seconds to remember everything he had learned about lions in the unforgiving landscape of East Africa. When the lion finally charged, Samuel was ready. The great cat covered the distance between them in 3 powerful bounds, but Samuel had been counting on that. At the last possible moment, he sidestepped to his right, using the lion's momentum against it while driving the rebar upward with all the strength his old body could muster. The improvised spear found its mark, penetrating deep into the lion's chest cavity and piercing its heart. The animal's charge carried it past Samuel, who rolled away despite his arthritis, and came up ready for a second attack that never came. The lion collapsed 10 feet away, killed instantly by a blow that had been delivered with the precision of a man who had spent years training for exactly this kind of life or death encounter. The village center fell silent, except for the sound of Samuel's heavy breathing and the distant wail of sirens that were still 20 minutes away. He stood over the dead lion, the bloody rebar still in his hand, looking like something out of an ancient legend. The crowd slowly emerged from their hiding places, staring in awe at the scene before them. Chief Morrison approached cautiously, his face pale with shock and something that might have been shame. "Mr. Kofi," Morrison said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Samuel looked down at the lion, then back at the faces of his neighbors who were seeing him clearly for the first time in years. "No apology needed, Chief," Samuel said, setting down the rebar and retrieving his walking cane. "Just remember that old soldiers don't stop being soldiers just because they get old." As the crowd gathered around their unlikely hero, Samuel Kofi limped slowly toward home, ready to finish his morning coffee and maybe tell his neighbors a few stories about what he had really done during his 30 years of military service. The lion was dead, the village was safe, and an 82-year-old veteran had reminded everyone that courage has no expiration date.